Hi everyone, Paula MacLean again, and I am back with the last of the free videos in the Great Boards Plain and Simple series. This video we're going to talk about is going to be about the 4 quarters of board work. Now this is a model that I developed a few years ago to get around some of the concerns that come forward of if our board is not involved in operations, if we don't do hands-on work, if we're not a working board, then why do people want to be here? Everybody who participates in a board comes to the organization because they have some heart connection to the services, the programs, the people who are served, and they are there to participate. And yet then we tell them, no, contemporary boards that are policy boards or policy governance boards, they don't get involved in operations. We hire staff and we delegate and we supervise and we evaluate and we do all those things to make sure the staff are doing their job. But what does a board member do then if we're not involved in operations? And one of our challenges is all of us, most of us have real lives and real work, and we want to do things well, and we're conscientious people. And in our working day, we do operational work. And so then when we sit down around a board table and we're volunteers, we have a really hard time not getting involved in operations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk with you about the 4 quarters of board work. And in fact, this is our way of saying to board members and executive directors, our board needs to be working at putting good foundations under which organizations are built. And that is real work, and that is real contribution. So we don't have to have board members involved in operations. We can have board members involved in the activities of the organization, and we can also invite them to be creating the foundations that put a solid, concrete base to every service and program, to all of the people who work for us and all the people who receive services from us. So what we really want to do is we want to be focused in this video about what are the quarters of board work. And then to just change things up a little bit further, I'm going to share with you 20 questions that every single board member in your organization should be able to answer. Because one of the things that board members is that they are the public relations potential of the organization in the community. Staff can't do it all, and when staff start talking about the organization, it feels self-serving. It feels like, hey, you're paid to do this. Whereas if a board member who's a volunteer knows things about the organization and does public relations because they're a volunteer, it comes across differently, and it has a different level, a different feeling, a different sincerity to it. So I want to talk about what those questions are as well. So let's go to this fancy chart. Now this looks complicated, but it really isn't. And I actually want to start backwards. I want to start at the 4th quarter and talk a little bit about 4 quarters of board work. And I've chosen the fiscal year quarters, but you can change those quarters to match what your year is. That doesn't really matter. But typically we have a fiscal year that runs from April to March. And that's for accounting purposes, and very often our funders use the same fiscal year. So whatever your quarters are, you can adjust this little chart to meet your needs and meet your expectations. In the 4th quarter, we talk about what should the board be doing. Well, let's talk about some of the things that are in the 4th quarter. First of all, because this is the quarter that leads up to the annual general meeting and the election of our new board, this is an active quarter for recruitment. Now, I'm going to do a full video in our 8-video course on nothing but board succession planning, recruitment, and orientation. So there's a whole module in the longer course devoted to this. So it's well beyond our 15 or 20 minutes that we have right now. So when you get to that course, then remind yourself that there's a whole video about this. But this is a time where we are active in recruitment. We also invite, because a good part of the recruitment process is invite candidates to the board, people who might be wanting to serve on the board, as guests to board meetings. So whether you have 2 or 3 meetings in that quarter or even 1, it's a time where we bring our new board members or our potential new board members into our board meeting, signing the appropriate confidentiality agreement, and we invite them to be observers and participants in the board conversation. This is also a time, because we're prior to the annual general meeting, where we often have audit and finance activities going on, and board treasurer and maybe one other board member is usually involved in the process of guiding the audit and receiving information back from the audit. So that's a part of this, and very often, because we're in the last quarter of the year, we're also looking at the agency's operating budget and potentially its capital budget as well, if you do have a capital budget. So think about, is this enough board work to be done in a 3-month period of time. And I think most of you say, hey, this is real work. Reviewing the budget, asking questions about the budget, having information come back to you to answer those questions is all part of what the board should be doing during that quarter. Let's move to the first quarter now. So we've got the quarter when we are actually saying we should interview some candidates for the board. We should be looking at who do we need to be on our board, and in the recruitment video, as part of the 8-video Great Boards in Plain and Simple series, we talk about how do you find those people and where do you find them and what are some of the criteria and how to do a board skills analysis or board skills audit so that we begin to be systematic in how we go about recruitment and orientation of board members. We finalize our nominations, we plan and we conduct the annual general meeting. Now here's a little flag for you. The annual general meeting is a meeting of members. Whether or not your board is the only member or whether you have 500 members doesn't matter. The annual general meeting should be, the meeting part of the meeting should be managed by the board. It should be the executive of the board that is actually stick handling the general meeting process, holding the election. There might be an operational report from the executive director or senior managers, and it might be the senior managers of the organization that put the practical parts of the meeting together, that book the meeting room if you need one, that put the crackers and cookies and cheese out, and et cetera, et cetera. All of that can be managed by staff. That's a perfectly fine thing. But the actual meeting portion, where we elect the board, where we review the annual report, where we review the auditor's financial statement, that is a board responsibility. So it's an important part of what boards do, and it's very often those responsibilities fall to staff because the board doesn't even know that it's their responsibility. And then we also elect the new members of the board, so those are directors or members of the board, and we elect the new executive, and sometimes it's the board that elects the executive. That's perfectly fine, and often the board will meet immediately after the annual meeting to elect the executive. So that's another quarter. That's 3 months of board work. Let's go to the second quarter. The second quarter is board orientation. You have some new members, and you might have some members who missed the orientation the last time. So we need to put together a board manual. We need to have a package of material that includes information about the organization, its organizational chart, the annual operating budget, last year's audited financial statements, the annual report, a calendar of all of the board and committee meetings, the governing bylaws, the governance policies. That's a big list, big binder. So we put that together, and then we also, because again, I believe in people before paper, we plan out an orientation for every new member to the board, to the organization. They spend time with senior staff. They spend time with your finance manager. They'll spend time with individual board members. And I really like the idea of a buddy system so that a longer-term board member and a new board member are matched up. They sit together at the table together. And again, we'll talk more about that in the actual module. But this then is also part of our third quarter activity. Now we also, or second quarter activity, sorry. And we also want to have a board training event. While people are new, is a great time for them to be learning. So whether or not that's bringing in a live speaker, or whether or not it's doing a little mini retreat, or whether or not it's watching, heaven forbid, some of Paula's videos, that would be fine too. And it's a training event to be able to get board members to know each other, to be able to be in conversation together. And it's a really great time for people who are just learning some of their new board roles to be able to say, hey, this is a group of people that I really feel close to, that I can do work with for many years to come. And a great thing to do in the second quarter of the year is to take a look at your governance policies. Now, if you haven't built governance policies yet, guess what? I have a video for that too. But if you have them, then it's a great time to spend some time reviewing them. It can be done as a board as a whole, or you can set a committee and ask that board committee to be able to put together some recommendations to the board about the governance policies and whether or not there's some changes or revisions that should be made. If you're just building your governance policies for the first time, get started in the second quarter, but you're probably going to be at this for another somewhere around 9 to 12 months if you're building them from scratch. And in the video on governance policies, I actually give you a template so that you can look at some of the areas that the governance policies need to cover. So it's a whole list, pretty comprehensive list of all the policies that you need to put together. And then let's go to the final part of this, which is the third quarter. And this is a time when we should do some active strategic planning. If you already have a plan, it's a great time to meet, get together, spend a Saturday updating your plan, thinking out loud about what some of the other directions of the organization might be. If you're first time out the gate doing strategic planning, then this is a great time to be able to begin the strategic planning process, and it might take you several months to complete that. So really an opportunity to get things kicked off if you don't have a plan already. If you have not done an executive director performance appraisal, you need governance policies to guide that. But it is the third quarter, which is running into your fourth quarter, is a good time to be able to put this together. And it's fall to winter normally, which is a good time for committee meetings. It tends to be a time when people are, back at work, they're not away on holidays, etc. So this is a good time to be able to put together your policy on executive director performance appraisals, or if the policy's there and it's time for an appraisal, to get the appraisal kicked off and get it going. And then, because one of the most important qualities of the 7 qualities of a great board is that you do an honest self-appraisal and analysis of whether or not your board is doing the things it needs to be able to do. And there's tons of checklists and information on that. And by all means, if you need something on that, send me an email to Paula MacLean at learningforleaders.ca, and I'll send you some stuff so that'll help guide you in the board self-appraisal process. Okay, so that's the 4 quarters of board work. Now, in your handout, the next 4 slides, I have a ton of detail on them, on the 20 questions that every board member should be able to ask and answer. And I'm going to walk you through a few of them, but I'm not going to bore you with having to talk about 20 points. But here's the major thing. Every board member is a public relations expert when it comes to the organization, but only if they have the information to be able to talk about it. So, the classic scenario, you go to a party, you're standing there, you're kind of bored, you see somebody who you don't really know, and then you all of a sudden have a little conversation with them. And one of the things that every board member should get comfortable with saying is, you know what, I have this great volunteer job. And the volunteer job is with this ServeLink organization. By the way, that was the organization in video 2. And I really love my work there. And, when I went there, I didn't know a lot about it. And here's some of the things that I found out. And, if the person's eyes glaze over, you can go to the next person. But what we're really saying is that you need to know stuff about your organization. So when this video is over, I would like you to stop, turn it off, and then come back in your handouts to look at these 20 questions and take some guesses. Some of you will absolutely know what the answers are to some of these because your work on the board has kind of exposed you to information. But take some notes after that and say, these are the answers to the questions, so that I can be a public relations expert on behalf of the organization when I go out in the community. It is a board member's job to be able to do that. And we as board members need to understand that the staff put hours and blood, sweat, and tears into the operational work of the organization, and that they cannot do it all. And one of the things that we can do within our board roles that is productive and helpful and supportive, and frankly can also turn into hard cold cash by way of donations, is to be public relations aware and to have the information that we need to go forward to. So just let me highlight a few of these. What year was the organization incorporated? Well, it might have been last year, which then you can talk about and say, this is a leading edge organization. It's meeting a gap in the community, and it didn't exist a year ago. And now look at all this cool stuff that we are doing, and we're only a year out the gate or 2 years out the gate. Or it might be a 50 or 60-year-old organization and say, we are so solid, so grounded, so inclined to be leading and serving our community. And so you can be proud either way, and either way is a great opportunity to say, gee, if you haven't heard of us, because we're only a year old, and it's an opportunity to educate. How many people does the organization serve in a year or in a month or in a week? Right? Very important to know, because our reach in our organizations is often far greater. I had a board member once guess the answer to this question in a board training seminar that I was doing, and the board member said, I think we serve about 50 people. And the answer was the organization served almost 500 people. Now, you might say, dumb board member. I don't think that at all. I think poor education. I think, how does that board member not connect to the size of this organization, to its capacity, to its complexity, to its reach? Right? So very important that we be able to say, I didn't know. I thought we served 50 people. Turns out we serve 500. Go figure. Right? Absolutely awesome to be able to do that. How many full-time and part-time people do you employ? Important information. In some communities that I work with, in smaller and semi-rural settings, in small towns, the not-for-profit organization is the biggest employer in town. And in kind of mid-sized centers, it's sometimes as big as the healthcare center in that organization. The hospital, it's often as big as the school system is in those communities. And so we are major contributors to the community. We employ people, and 90% of the money that we pay those people stays right in our town. So while you might see us when we're fundraising, you might see us when we're in the middle of a campaign, you might see us asking for donations, the reality is that the amount of money that we bring into this community is often substantial. So can you see what we're doing with this information? And the next 3 pages, at the end of this video, I want you to stop and I want you to answer those questions. And every board member who's watching this video should be jotting notes as we go along so that you are better educated and better able to play a public relations role for your organization. So let me just talk a little bit about Mastering the Basics as a video course. We're going to talk about all of the things that are necessary by way of board development to be able to be successful as a board. There's nothing more frustrating as a volunteer. Time is tight for all of us, and you're a volunteer and you do not want to waste your time on the board. So my mission, after 25 years of doing live training in many boardrooms and many church basements and many small and large kinds of events, my mission is to put information in front of you and your board that will be helpful and practical to you so that you can bring the best possible board process to your organization. You are the foundation, you are the pillars on which the organization sits, and you should know how to do your job well, and we have not in this sector done a particularly good job of supporting and encouraging our board members to do a good job. Talk to you soon. My name is Paula MacLean. I'm your video coach, and all the best.